All right, welcome back to the Evolution with Mac and Jenn podcast. It is Jen and Mac here, and we're very excited as we always are. um,
Everybody.
Mac said hi. I don't know if you could hear him. Say it again.
Yeah, they can hear me. I can see the mic. It's
Okay,
working.
awesome. Well, today we're gonna talk about divorce, right?
Yep.
Or I was gonna ask Mac. Okay, so how do we want to start it? Do you just want me to ask the first question and then we'll
Yeah.
like see what comes up from
Yeah,
there?
we're just gonna have an open discussion about it to see what might stir up or what happens because we've both been divorced. So
We have both been divorced. And we're both on our second marriage. That's cool. All right. So I guess the first question is, Mac, why do you think people get divorced? Or what would you, if you had to choose, what would be the leading, what do you think the leading cause of divorce is?
the leading cause of divorce,
Sure.
I would say the leading cause of divorce that would probably, and this is a mix of many things. One, statistically, and then also just like knowing that there has to be some level of authority. I would say the lack of it's this isn't going to come across quite right, but I'll have to explain it. Number one, probably the lack of God inside of a marriage. And that doesn't mean always that if you think you know something about God, that you continue with that something, because it could be wrong. This is a very, very non-judgmental, but yet authoritative type place to come from. And that would be kind of looking at it saying, that God created all of us. He is the authority, and trying to figure out how that authority represents itself inside of a marriage and what the roles are and everything else versus right. So there's the conversation of God that some people will be triggered by because they don't really know God. They know religion, or they know what they experienced inside religion, which is very negative, and then it gets pinned on God. So that's not what I'm talking about. This is just the fundamental resources of like we are God's children. We were created from nothing. He gives us suggestions on how to live and how to show up. And a lot of people will disconnect, and then they don't answer to God. And if you answer to God, then there is an authority to your marriage, and then you uphold that marriage through that authority. And so there's a different level of commitment that comes with that, because if, you know, granted, I'm still learning who God is. Yeah, like I think God is a loving God. However, he is to be feared to some extent, as far as like if I do dumb shit, I should fear the consequence. Right. Like that's kind of, and so when I commit to a marriage, like I'm not only committing to her, but I'm also committed to the authority of God that says, if you don't do what I say, there are consequences. Like there's certain things that happen here. And so with, with like, I'll just go with you, when we, before we even got married, I was very intentional about asking God to show me if this was where I needed to be. Like I need to know. And I changed some behaviors and everything else just to get aligned as best I could, so that I could know, because this was not a decision I was going to take lightly. This was a decision that I was going to take eternal, not just even in this world, as far as like, um, if I'm doing this in front of God, I don't care who else is watching. And you guys have seen what we've talked about before, where our marriage was not a show for the world. It wasn't. It was a conversation between me, her, and God, that once that took place. So now my standard of a marriage is upheld by God, not by a piece of paper, the world, some story, some feelings, some comparisons, or whatever the world wants to tell you of who does what. It's upheld by that. So the standard that I am holding myself to is very high, versus most people will get into something, they will go along with the world's view. There's a lot of stuff around the conversation of like a woman's role, how you can do this, and the world will tell you, as a woman you can do anything, you want and everything else, and just shove the guy aside, and the guys have become weak inside of that and lost their authority because they're not finding their authority through God, and they're trying to make her happy or do whatever, and it's falling apart consistently over and over again, especially about the time the kids leave. So there's a big conversation inside of that that is just like, well, I would say number one is probably God. And you look at families that are connected to God in a different in like some way of authority, and statistically it kind of tells a story that way more likely to stay together.
I think that's a really great answer because that's not like where my mind even went at all.
Hmm.
But for those that don't know, and I think we talked about it on a podcast one time, but what were the behaviors that you changed before we got married that helped you to get clear with God on what you wanted to do?
With the like, I stopped having sex. Is that the one you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah. So um I've known God and everything else, but when we started dating, we didn't have sex. I didn't even kiss her. We just dated for about 4 months to get clear, and that is a big piece of this whole discussion too. Like, most people don't know how to date, right? Like, they jump into something, it becomes a relationship, they're all excited with it, and then they can't get out because they don't know, they don't have a platform, they don't know where they're at, there's no authority, and so they get stuck in it. And then the right thing to do is just, you just kind of fall into that zone, or you wind up with kids or whatever, and then they're married, and then, wow, this isn't what I wanted, and the story goes on.
Yeah, so we dated for 4 months and we didn't even kiss for the first 4 months, which means we also weren't having sex, but we were having fun.
Yeah, we were fooling around doing different things, and
But I also too, I love that because I went through that experience with you, that when I'm like coaching women now, like I make it very clear to them, like while they're dating, I'm like, do not have sex. Like don't do it. Like
yeah,
it'll be worth the wait.
yeah, it's a big deal. And it,
Not saying wait till you get married, but like just don't do it like
yeah,
until at least you're like committed.
yeah, because we talked about this the other day. uh, a guy is very sexually driven often, and if you're a beautiful woman and he's attracted to you, and like, if he's not like me and set the boundaries way before, he will just follow along, and if you let him, he's going to. And it kind of doesn't speak much for him, other than he hasn't been through what I've been through, which doesn't really, I mean, it's just kind of one of those things where if he's never known a different behavior, then that's what he's going to do. And then once you give him permission for that, then you shouldn't expect anything different, right? There's no standard that's been set. There's no anything. So, but if you want a guy that you know that you can trust, um, sexually, um, be vulnerable with, you want to know how he's going to show up if you don't. I mean, what happens if you get with them, there's sparks, everything works, you have sex, okay? Okay, it is what it is. And then it just continues and continues and continues. As a woman, what you'll do is you'll create a story in your head that says, I have to give him sex to keep getting this from him, because that's your belief, because you put out immediately. So therefore, if you're not putting out, that must mean something. And then all of a sudden, if something were to happen, like, I don't know, maybe you get a bladder infection, you don't talk about it, or whatever. And so then you withhold. Subconsciously, you're going to have this story that comes in that says, like, well, what's he going to do if I don't give it to him? And then there's fear that comes inside of that. However, if you, like her, date a guy for 4 months that chooses not to have sex with you, there's different stories that come with that. Like, wait, what's going on? What, like, I talked through and I told her certain things why, but, and I told her my intentions and everything. So, but being able to do that, one, she knows that, like, she's safe. If she doesn't want to have sex or something happens, it's like not a big deal, because I've already proven it's not a big deal. Also, I have the strength to not just go bang anything that lets me bang it, right? Like, that's,
One of the ladies I was talking to, she's on the dating apps and she said that it seems like every guy just wants like a hookup or something like that. And so I told her and I called it that, or I said guys will test the temperature.
mm,
So like if you're on the dating app, the guys may throw it out there just to test and kind of see where you're at. And like, so it appears that that's what they all want. And like, of course, they probably all do because they're guys, right?
Yeah.
But it's like they'll test the temperature, meaning they'll throw it out there, and how you respond shows them, where you're at and what their next move is. Like if you're down, they're like, great, they'll just, have sex and be on their way, right?
And
But
and for a guy it can mean nothing, but for a woman it never means nothing.
right. I think, yeah, that's true. And so, but I think that so they'll test it, they'll throw it out there, and then but if you say, no, then it's like then that makes them think different. Then they think, okay, either now I have to like now she's like a challenge and I'm gonna, actually work for her, right? Or or maybe if all they are is looking for sex, then they'll just show you where they're at, right?
Yeah, and they'll leave. Problem solved.
Right. And so, but I think most men will a little bit like test the temperature because they want to see like where you're at.
Well,
But it doesn't necessarily
there's
mean that they're all just looking for sex.
yeah, this is I think this is a little challenging because it's not a game. Okay. It's and so if you play the sex card as a game, you're not going to be happy. That's going to be messed up. It just doesn't work. However, a guy likes a challenge. He likes to hunt. And so it kind of might be a little bit of a game for him, but he's not like the right guy isn't making it a game. Some men will, and those are the ones you need to dispose of or get rid of.
I think
And
they don't like a game, but they like a woman who has some standards.
that a woman that has standards in a form of um she knows what she wants,
She loves herself.
she loves herself, and she won't give in to just because, she's very clear and intentional about who she is, and usually does it appears very like you can tell it's like there's not only the way she behaves, but there's also an appearance. It's almost like a elegance about her and the way she holds herself and everything else. Typically won't dress like a slut or overdo the makeup or anything, like very just self-content with who she is very sexy, like extremely sexy
Well,
for
thank
for the
you.
majority of men. And
I like makeup, but I'm currently not wearing any.
yeah, so and guys, like it doesn't mean that I don't like makeup, but when I see makeup plastered on, I don't even have much of a reaction. Now, there may be certain times if I'm extremely like turned on or really like just got like an urge that it doesn't matter. I mean, if it looks good type of thing. But typically that doesn't come with any type of a fulfilling emotion.
Okay, I love that. But back to topic.
Okay.
Okay. So I asked you, what was the question I asked you? What causes divorce?
What's the probably the leading cause of divorce?
And you said lack of God inside of the relationship. And I do. I think that's such a great answer because I wasn't thinking that. But I haven't heard that before, but I think that is a great answer.
Yeah. Well,
Because everything goes back down to not having that guidance,
it's a standard.
a standard and like the authority. So like I mean this here, I just Googled
Yeah,
what's the number
I
one
just want
cause.
before you go
Oh
there,
yeah.
I just want to say that it doesn't like I believe that there are some people out there that may not that might have a great marriage outside of really knowing God. It's not like there are that could be a thing, but I would say that if you have a great marriage without God, you can have a better marriage with God. Is 100% my belief that, and this isn't religion speak. This is God coming inside of who you are, because God will never fail you ever. His standard is his standard. The truth is the truth, and that's it. And so if at any time you need someone to lean on, that's who you can lean on. That will never betray you. Everyone else on the planet at some point will have a weakness or say something wrong or even tell you something that then they change their mind on, and it's confusing. That's just kind of life. whereas God is a constant figure of guidance and source energy and everything.
It's
So
actually really good because most people when they're having problems inside their relationship, like they may turn to like therapy or something like that and seek guidance like when it's already almost too not too late, but when it's too late,
yeah,
right?
and most of the time they seek permission to leave.
Where a therapist, isn't God, but it's guidance and some skills and authority and tools in order to create something magical, which God has already actually laid it out for you, right? But most of us don't. I mean, not most of us. A lot of us do turn to that guidance, but a lot of us don't. When I was married to my first husband, God was not in our relationship. And I would say that God being very present in our relationship, it is completely different. And it actually is a big deal. And most of the couples that I see out there, the ones that have God as a authority
In a healthy way.
in a healthy way.
Because my relationship did have God involved, but there was some very unhealthy shit that was happening.
Okay, yes. Relationships that have God as an authority have a higher chance of succeeding. Most of the relationships that I've seen like around me, the ones that like, you know, what's the word? Most of them
That lean on God.
that lean on God, um the relationships seem healthier than the ones that I know of that don't. And I look for relationships that I admire because I want to model what they do because I want to create that, right? And so most of the ones that I see that I admire that I model, um, I think that most of them, if not all of them, do have God present in the relationships. Even some people that I just watched from afar, but like my whole life, I can think of a couples that that have always had God in the relationship. So I actually think that's a really really great answer. Because I was gonna say like, it's like not knowing how to communicate.
Yeah,
Which is like
obviously.
wah wah.
Yeah, and so to that point, right? Not knowing how to communicate. My communication skills dramatically changed because of the way that I brought God into the conversation. Did you know that?
Did I know that?
Yeah.
I could feel that because should I talk?
Well, go ahead.
Well, I could feel that because when you speak and when we communicate, you speak with certainty and a type of authority that doesn't come from you.
Yeah.
And so that actually makes me feel like really good and safer. And like that's like everything that I wanted that I knew I wanted, but didn't know I wanted at the same time.
Yeah. So, um, to put a little different view on authority, some people will think that when we say authority, it's going to be like they're going to have a tendency to think um, like repressive, right? Because they think God is repressive. They think authority, a man having authority in a conversation is repressive. Like that's the tendency of where it goes. And so I'm going to kind of flip that a little bit. Um, so God told man to love his wife. That's it, right? Like that's the statement that is repeated some, I don't remember how many times. Like
I don't know. I can look it up.
I'm yeah, I'm like look it up. Google how many times in the Bible does God say love your wife? And so when with that statement, that doesn't mean just love your wife. That has a massive statement. Like there's a lot around that. And by me just being trying to be obedient to that, I have uncovered a lot of why that is. The emotional positions of women, of females in general, why it's important to love them, why it's important to give them space, why it's important to not necessarily hold everything they're saying as like fact or whatever. Because if I just relied on authority, I would be looking at, like, if she said something that didn't match what was being said somewhere else, I'd be like, that's wrong. And then that would be a very unsafe place to be. Right? Like if I was constantly having authority to correct or do whatever, that would be problematic. However, it says love your wife, which means it doesn't matter what she does, you're just going to love her. It doesn't matter what she says, you're just going to love her. And it doesn't really matter. Like, stop thinking that you need to have control over this or something. Like, God told you this for a reason, trust it and move with it. And so there's certain times when there's certain things being said that the natural side of me, the worldly side, would challenge or what, well, what's this, and kind of get into a debate on it, which would not be healthy. That's not loving my wife. And what is loving my wife is allowing her to speak, to try to feel her feelings, to understand her feelings. And even if she were to straight up attack me, I don't care. I'm still going to love her. It's okay. And my certainty comes from God, as far as, like, he's got my back. I don't, like, he just said love her, so who cares what this is? I'm just going to love her. And guess what happens? Everything works out, and she appreciates me. um like it's just like a very beautiful thing. But because of that standard, it gives me the strength to hold back some of the thoughts or things that might come to mind in the moment, to be able to see that it's emotional, right? Like, men are logical, women are emotional, typically, easy. I mean, we're both, but um, men will defer to logic, where women will defer to feeling. And a man can't understand that. It's fascinating too, because we've watched these podcasts or listened to them, and the guy will be saying something, and I'll be like on the guy's side, and I'll think that she's hearing the same thing that I'm hearing, and then something will come out of her mouth against the guy on the woman's side, and I'm like, okay, we are not on the same page. Like, it's the difference of the feeling side, of the emotional side of the woman needing something and not getting it from the man. But if she were to get it, then it all's like goes away like that. But if the guy stays in the zone of trying to, like, get his certainty in the conversation, or trying to point something out logically, it just gets worse and worse and worse.
So, um, Google says that it says in the Bible 12 times that man love woman.
I honestly think it's a lot more than that.
It said 12. That's a lot though, still. And it pointed out, I don't know where it went. It kind of went away after I did it, but it said 12 times, which is totally fine. So in the Bible, it says man loves woman, and that's the standard. And in the Bible, what does it say the woman should do?
Respect the man. Never once does it tell a woman to love her husband.
But we do, right?
Yes,
We do.
you do, because it's very easy for you to love everybody.
So what I love with all of this is that before I ever so I started going to church probably like 6 months before Mac and I met. So what was that, like 2 years ago or something? I started going to church like 2 years ago, and I'm sitting there listening to the pastor talk, and everything that he was saying, like like he was talking about the Bible, and then he was like kind of translating it into like today, or he was sharing a message on like whatever the message was for that day. And so he was taking from the Bible and saying like, here's the message, here's what to learn from this. And everything that he was saying, every single week I would go, I was just like so blown away, because everything that I had learned in personal development, like, was being validated every single weekend when I was at church, but through like a religious
Right.
Bible lens, right? And so every week I was like listening, and I'm like, oh my God, like he's like, one weekend he's talking about like how to be happy or whatever. And everything he's saying, I'm just like, yes, yes, yes. I'm like, this all makes sense, I'm like looking around at everybody like, are you guys listening? Do you hear this? Because it like this stuff works. And they say, man loves woman, woman respects man, which I totally love that and appreciate that. And I think it's like spot on. But what I love is when you bring like personal development into it and do the work that we do, it doesn't just say like, okay, love your wife or respect your husband, because you hear that and but you're like, well, how do I do that, right? But the work we do is teaching kind of like how to do that, because when you speak, Mac, like you say like what things you do is like you give me certainty, you make me feel safe, you seek to understand me, right? Like all those things. And like, so if you're like, okay, well, just love your wife. It's like men will look at you like, well, how do I do that?
I
Like,
do love her.
I do love
I
her.
do love her.
I do love
Yeah.
her. No, like,
So,
you do,
so
are
this,
you
yeah,
actually loving her? Like, are you? And so it's like, from personal development, they say like, there's three things that a woman needs, and well, we need a lot, but in order to keep us open and feeling loved, like we need to feel safe, we need to feel understood, and we need to feel seen, right? That's how you love your wife. You make her feel safe by giving her certainty. You make her feel understood by holding space for her. And you make her feel seen by just telling her how pretty she is. Right?
yeah.
And it makes
So,
us feel so good. But I'm not done.
okay.
And then it says woman respects your husband, and from the work we do, I've learned like, okay, how do we respect our husband? Like, how do we show him respect? Well, there's a lot of ways to show respect to your husband, but I think there's, three things that could be taken from this on how to show your husband respect. And it's one, don't criticize him. Two, stay open and don't close off from him, which means like share your feelings, stay vulnerable. And three, how to respect your husband is like you don't try to control him. And a lot of times, like even us trying to control him could be trying to control even the way he sees us. Right.
Yeah.
And so love your wife, respect your husband, and so the key is you follow the word, and when you have God in your life and you listen and say, okay, love your wife, respect your husband. Okay, great. Then it's like, how do I do that? That's when you come to us, and then we'll show you how to do that. But I think that bottom line, it's like just having that God piece in it and actually following it and saying this stuff does work. Like what the Bible says works. And even if you get triggered around it sometimes, because I still get triggered a little bit too if I don't know. Because if somebody's like, well, you need to respect your husband, Jen, and my husband is getting wasted in the garage every night, like it's really hard to respect him, right? And so I'd be like, well, fuck that, like, but it's like, how, like, how can I show respect? Like, if you want something beautiful, the Bible is the guide.
Yeah. And
It truly
it
is.
kind of tells you like, hey, here's the foundational pieces. However, like she said, if you're in a situation where there really can't be respect or love because of a bunch of things going on, then you just kind of got to start going in that direction of being like, okay, I know there's something here. I need shown what and why and how to and what to do about it, and then you kind of step into that and lean on it and move through it. There's a right answer for the context of the moment, and what we're saying right now may not be the exact right answer, but it's still the truth. And so you kind of got to be obedient to the truth of the word of God, and say there's something here, let me figure out what it is. Because even when I started looking at it and saying like, well, what does it mean to love your wife? It wasn't until I went through the uncomfortable side of emotional chaos, but just being very like content and just holding space and just sitting there and observing and being like, it, like my internal reaction to this conversation right now does not feel like love towards my wife. So don't say anything. Right. Like that's kind of sometimes a conversation in my head. I'm not always perfect at it. Sometimes I'll still say something or try to have a logical conversation and I regret it every time. And because she's in an emotional state and I'm trying to have a logical conversation and it just does, but it's a clash right there
And
in
that
itself.
and that's when where people will say it's the communication,
Yeah.
like we're like the cause of divorce or relationships ending is lack of communication.
Yep.
And so I think that through through this work you become a better communicator, but also I think it's understanding that like you love me, I respect you.
Let me just say a fact right here. Okay. There is no way as a man for me to communicate with you as a woman in those moments
Right.
properly.
I think one of the things we must understand is that we're different.
Yeah.
And to stop judging each other's our differences and learn how to appreciate what we both can bring to the table and appreciate how we are different.
Yeah. And because the command is love your wife for me, I'm speaking for me right here. Love your wife. It means in those moments when it makes no sense to me and I'm extremely uncomfortable because empathetically I am feeling what she's feeling and I don't like it. I want to ditch the feeling as fast as I can. But the truth is, if I don't sit there in those feelings with her, she doesn't feel heard. So it's not about communication. It's about loving.
Right. If you don't sit like your I most men, their first reaction is to try to solve our problem.
Yep.
And as soon as you start trying to solve our problem, in that moment we don't feel seen, we don't feel understood, we don't feel heard. So it's just those three things I said: safe, understood, and seen. The moment you try to solve the problem, we immediately don't feel those things and we shut down, and then it's like you're not listening.
Yep. No longer safe. Even though I already felt it, I already understood it, I already saw it, all these things. I 100% I get it. I understand it. Okay, what can we do about it? Oh, you don't get it.
Right. So Mac has gotten really good at just holding space,
And
right?
it does not ever get easier. I'm gonna tell you
Even
that right now.
even though if I, come to him with anything, like I'm sure his brain is like, solve the problem. How do I solve the right?
Well, and a lot of times the first reaction with some of the heavier stuff is it feels like I am failing,
Mm,
right? Because most time you're bringing me something that is somewhat in my control,
right.
right? Because it might be a situation that has to do with money. It might be a situation that has to do with some sort of outward pressure that I'm putting you into. Because like ultimately, if I take personal responsibility for everything, everything's also my fault.
Right.
So when you come to me with your feelings, I immediately think I fucked this up. It's my fault. And so I want to justify it, but I'm really good at just saying like, well, there's nothing you can do about it right now, even if it is your fault. So just listen,
He
and
tells that to himself.
yeah, I tell that to myself. If I need to, most of the time I know how this works.
Because most men, most relationships, even in my first marriage, I know we go to our partners, our men with our feelings, and they immediately, yes, take it personal and react to that.
Yep.
And then we immediately don't feel seen, understood, heard, safe, none of it. So we say, well, you're not listening, you're not hearing me. And he's like, what, I hear you, da 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 da. And it turns into like a big thing. And so I think right here in like this is like one of the reasons where relationships start to end.
And that is a result of a discontent man. Because
Or just a
if
man that's not super, that doesn't know this.
Well, I can tell you, even before I knew it, if I was really content with my life at the moment, I naturally held space
Hmm.
most of the time. Now, sometimes I would still try and fix the problem too soon, but I had this natural ability of holding space. Now, if I'm unhappy with the results that are happening, and you say something about something that I feel like I'm in control of, that's going to be a problem. And you have to literally be trained on how to deal with that if you feel that way as a guy, to not react and not destroy your own relationship.
And I think us as women get to understand that it's just in their nature to try to solve our problems, that to see what we're saying as a problem that they can solve and fix. And so it's like when we come to them, and they do try to solve or fix or, maybe take it personal, not to react, for us not to react to that because we just, can see that, can see why they're doing it now. Like once you're conscious of why it's happening, you can kind of appreciate it more than judge it. Because when you react, now we're judging you, right? Because of the way you're reacting. But now if you know, oh, that's just, I actually appreciate the fact that you want to solve, but like I'm feeling really unheard right now.
Yeah, and then it also goes into the like respect your husband conversation, because this respect goes to the point of like your husband is the authority in the household, and and he's gonna know things that you don't, and kind of aren't designed to know in certain ways. Doesn't mean there's not uh like this woman might be better at this thing than this guy over here. Like there's certain things that some guys aren't going to be good at and some women aren't going to be good at, or vice versa. And so it might look like, well, guys do this and women do this. Well, not always, right? Like there are some guys that are very good at like, let's say, positively dealing with kids, and some women that aren't. But more likely, it's women are going to be more positively with kids, and men are not going to be as good at it as women. That's the typical, but it doesn't mean you're not going to have some of the cross type stuff happening once in a while, and that's fine. Like you make it work, but there still has to be some level of authority that goes towards respect the husband and love your wife. That's
it's
that's how God designed it.
it's also understanding that we are different,
Mhm.
and we need to stop judging each other's differences. I read a Facebook post the other day where a lady was complaining about bedtime because a husband gets home from work around bedtime and immediately he just starts playing with the kids, gets them all riled up while she's trying to like get them settled down for bed. And so she's like really pissed at the husband.
Mhm.
And I understand because it's like it's bedtime. You want the kid, so she's angry at the husband. She thinks he doesn't care. She thinks he doesn't respect her, I guess. Like, what do you think about that?
Well, it depends. Does she work?
I don't know. This is what I said. I said, I said, you know, I said, I don't really know, but what I've heard is that men, and I always kind of like I don't want to come in with too much certainty, but I don't really know, but what I heard is that men bond through play while women bond through like nurturing and like touching, like cuddles and stuff. And so when your husband comes home from work and he starts playing with the kids, I think she's upset because she has a story in her head that says he doesn't care, he's not respecting, he's, just messing around, like whatever. When maybe if she could stop judging that part of him and instead look at it as my husband, this is his way of bonding with the kids, and I actually appreciate that. And maybe we can figure out like a way to something with the bedtime, either push it back or something. But like, but rather than judging him for what he does when he comes home, try to switch her lens to appreciation, knowing that like her husband's intention is not bad. Does that make
Well,
sense?
and she's probably judging herself on her ability to get the kids in bed and everything else.
Right. And so it's really just like I think when we get into relationships and we start, we getting to know, we're in it now, we're married, all these things, it's really easy to start just judging each other and judging the way that we like each other does things, thinking, well, my way would be a better way. And so I'm going to get pissed at him when he, like, you know, her bedtime routine, she's judging him, thinking hers is better than, his. Maybe his is, I'm going to tire these kids the F out and they're just going to pass out on the floor. Great.
Mhm.
And so we just, like, she's like, no, my way is better. And she's angry at him or he like, and so it's just this constant, like, we're just judging each other as opposed to just appreciating each other and our differences and then figuring out how to like work together, and working together is like the man back to like, how do I love her, how do I hear her, and then for her, how do I respect him. But also us women, I think too, things that can ruin relationships is like when we're too much in our masculine energy and the polarity gets messed up, like when we are trying to control everything.
Okay, so I'm going to jump in on this
Sure.
because ultimately that is actually happening because the men are weak. That's the majority of when women become masculine, it's a result of weak men.
Yes,
And and
well, I agree with that.
and if a man like leans on God and investigates and figures it out and quits listening to the world and quits listening to his wife when it comes to like you should, then he will lead in a way that it doesn't matter. Now, is she always going to agree with you? Maybe not. But there's going to be times when the wife is going to say, I don't want this, I don't want to do this. And if it is subjectively against the law of God of how things work, you have to hold firm, trusting what God said is true. If you don't hold firm, then she will begin to take control a little, because now you become weak because you are succumbing to her wishes, not God's. And that will make you weak and you will fail in that. So that's a very challenging place to be when, as men, we are built to provide and protect our wife, our family, our everything. And so when she is possibly just bitching about something or very uncomfortable about something, doesn't want to deal with something or whatever, the ability to genuinely hold space for where she's at, but still lead her in the direction where she may not want to go, but it's the truth, is it fucking sucks. Okay, it's very uncomfortable. It fucks with your emotions and everything else. It like makes you question everything because like the ultimate question here is if I continue on this path, is she going to leave me? Because in the world today, fucking women are leaving their men left and right. It's
Mhm.
like over 70% of divorces are initiated by the woman, while the guy is clueless, working his ass off, thinking what the fuck, and so there's a big concern, but you have to trust God in this objective to say this is what's necessary. So with my relationship, I was weak. Okay, like I was doing the whole, well, give her space, let her do her thing, like this is what she wants. Like I've never told, like I never really told her what she had to do except for a few times. It was like, no, that can't happen, it needs to go this way, very few times. So when she started telling me that I was holding her back and blah 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 and all this stuff, I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? Like this doesn't make any sense to me because I've always not only that, but I've fed you a ton of money. I've fed like I put time into this. I've taken care of the freaking kids while you weren't, and like all this stuff, and then all of a sudden everything gets piled on me anyway. And but what really did it was I stood up and said, no, this is how we're going to do it. This is the right way to do it. This is how we're going to do it. And going back to the conversation of God getting being used improperly inside of a relationship, there's certain things that um, God says that like if you do them, you will gain the rewards from them. What turned into my relationship was God became a very easy way to get everybody else to stop asking questions from her. Because if God said, how do you challenge it? So if I say, well, God told me to do X, Y, Z, can you really challenge it? Not really. Like, because what are you going to do? Tell the person that God is wrong when they're telling you God told them to do something? And so she started using this. She figured out it worked. So she started using this thing of, well, God told me I need to do this. Now I eventually told her, I was like, I don't care what God told you to do. If God told you to do something personally, then you should do it. But God doesn't tell you what I need to do. That's not how God works, ever. So shut the fuck up, and we're going to do it this way. Here's the standard. This is how we're going to work. And that pretty much ended the marriage because I started holding that standard and then figured out just who she was. And it broke it pretty much immediately. And at that point, it was just a matter of days before as it crumbled because she was not going to uphold that standard. And I just got very honest. I wasn't afraid to admit anything, expose anything. Like, um, there's certain things, and there's also an integrity that has to be upheld of God keeps his word and God tells you to keep your word. She did not. I did my best, and if I didn't, I owned it. She did not. So that was where there's, that everybody says don't use the Lord's name in vain. Okay, like that's a quoted scripture. Um, that does not, it does, but it doesn't. It does not mean don't say God damn it. Okay, that's not what that was referencing when it was written. It says do not swear, like don't swear with God's name. That means don't make promises with God's name. That's ultimately what it means. It means don't tell people to do things in God's name because now you're swearing with God's name and you're using his name in vain to leverage his authority to get people to do things because of your wants and desires. That is a very sketchy, like you do not spiritually want to be in that place. And that's what was beginning to happen.
Well, I think there's also like there's all of this, but then it's like just recognizing the energy that you're you're what's the word? It's like recognizing the energy that is coming from you. And what I mean by that, I mean it's like are you making decisions from a place of fear or are you making decisions from a place of love? So when I say the energy, is it fear based or is it love? And I think that's a whole nother like conversation.
Yeah.
But if you're like living from fear, meaning you're afraid to be yourself because of what everybody's going to think, or if you're afraid to, make decisions because of XYZ, if you're making excuses, if you're lying, if you're if it's coming from fear, you're going to say things and act a certain way that aren't of integrity.
Mm.
But if you're moving in from a space of love, then you show up much differently. And so they would say like I don't know, like if you want to talk, I don't want to talk about narcissists, but if you say like a narcissist would, deep down, they're afraid.
Yeah.
They're really
Fear,
fearful.
fear usually drives narcissists.
So they're going to show up and say things and do things and move in a way that all is coming from fear,
Yeah.
right?
They're trying to present something that they think they need to be in order to be, to not be. And I think in their minds they fear that if they're not showing up a certain way that they'll be eliminated
It's it's
in some way.
it's projecting strength through fear.
Yeah.
As opposed to strength through love.
Yeah. And one of the difference is in that conversation is, when you're doing it from a place of like real faith in God, you're trusting a process that sometimes looks like you're you're about to sacrifice yourself, and that's what it feels like, right? Like, I don't know what's happening. I'm just trusting this. I'm probably going to lose everything. Like everything in my mind tells me that this is not the right thing, but everything in my heart tells me it is the right thing. And you put your trust in that, in God. And when you're in that space and that vulnerable, there is a certainty in it that cannot be broken. And so there's certain things with like when we were dating of why I held that standard, because I was like I need to know. And and I don't want to, one, I don't want to hurt anyone. I don't want to wind up in the wrong place. I was still on a healing journey as that was going on too. Plus I needed to learn who you were to figure out if this was like the right thing or not. On top of that, I needed to do enough of the right things in front of God to trust that he was helping me. Right. So like if I was having just straight sex with you, which was like morally not quite aligned, even though, yeah, we did and whatever. I mean, I'm not perfect, but I still needed some level of like, I know he's still with me, even though I'm not perfect. And by holding that standard gave me the certainty of saying God is with me, God is moving with me. And so then eventually we made it a relationship and then started having sex and everything else. Cause like, I mean, I don't suggest that people do this. But I mean, it just is what it is. And it was great. But then it started to get kind of just the same a little bit. And then like the call came in my mind of like, what are you doing? Like if you're pretty much with her all the time, you're having sex all the time, everything else, why aren't you married? Why not? Like, is this what God wants? It's like, oh shit. And so then I'm thinking about it and I'm like, I need to know. And if I'm going to call on God, I need to live in a way that he would approve of. So we need to stop. Like I gotta turn this off for now. So in that, there's this fear of like, is she gonna leave? Is what or whatever, so there's this uncertainty, but a knowingness in my heart that even if she does, then hey, that's then there's this is her quote, but I've said it in different ways. It's, well, I guess if not this, then better will be coming.
Mhm.
And if it's better than this, then I have a lot to look forward to.
Yeah.
So that was kind of like the trusting, that being kind of like worried about it. And the whole world's like, what?
Mm.
Like, why would you, that doesn't make, except for the spiritual people that actually get it. And so there's a lot of faith that goes into that. And that's like truly kind of getting into the why it's so important to have God, because now I'm not making decisions based on me. Because if I make decisions based on me, I will always be questioning those decisions.
Mm.
If it's me and God together, I eventually often on big decisions will get a feeling that it's like, it doesn't matter what happens after this. I have the feeling that I should move forward on this, so I'm going to, or I have a feeling that I shouldn't. Walk away. No matter how good that deal is, walk away. And then like maybe the next person comes in and the deal was amazing for them. And I'm like, it doesn't matter. I got the feeling to walk away. And maybe that's why it was good for the next person. I don't know. But I know I had to. Right. So for whatever reason, I trust when I have those feelings of me and God combined, that's a trust and a faith that's untouchable. And that's why with our marriage, it doesn't really matter what you do. I'm like, no, God gave me you and you're it. Like you would have to run away, like straight up, like disappear and tell like in multiple ways tell me to stay away before I'm not going to fight for it.
Mhm.
Right? Like that's just where like kind of how it is. I mean, at some point I might have to be like, okay, well, I guess it's space, but I still feel like this was the answer given for me. So I'm not sure, but maybe kick you out for 24 hours and see what happens. So, like it doesn't, I don't know, but it's not like, oh, well, it didn't work. Move on. No, that's not it. It's legit. Like I look to the word and says like don't put your wives out, love your wives, everything else. Like it is an eternal thing for me, not just oh, it was a good time. Right. Like that. I don't work that way. I didn't work that way before, but I had errors before. I still do, but not on that level. So when it comes to these women that are leaving their men, that's just simply like I look at that straight up as weak men. And that's going to piss a lot of them off. But what I can tell you is I coach a lot of women. I've been coaching a lot of women for over a decade, over and over, trying to help them, trying to do this, trying to do this. Guess what I've found? Over the hundreds or maybe even thousands of women that I've coached, even to a very high intense level, to the point of telling them they're fucking lying to me, like coming at them, like coming at them hard, coming at them soft, all the directions, right? like shit that if you guys knew that I did, like you'd be like, you are out of your freaking mind. And most of the ones that I've come at the hardest are still being coached with me. And they know that I have a genuine like love and caring and truth for them, and they do not take offense to what I do. However, they still don't always want to show up because if they know they're out of line, they know I'm going to find it, and it's uncomfortable, but they still show up. Yeah. So just as a reference, this is like who I deal with. So you think your wife might be a pain in the ass? Well, my clients sometimes are a pain in the ass too. But guess what? Because I hold an authority based on like what God teaches, not based on what Mac thinks all the time. Like sometimes maybe, but it's based on like the truth. Like there's just a standard that we hold. It's not going to be for everyone this or that, but there are some standards that are eternal standards. On like this is where we want to go. We may not be there, but this is where we want to go. Do you know what happens about the second that I stop coaching these women? Most likely they go back to where they were. Or they create stories, or there's just that, like there's a standard that I hold of the truth that kind of keeps them moving forward in line. And most of them don't have a man, and some of them do, and then there's a mix. And like I'm never like sometimes I have to discredit what their guys do because it is dumb shit, but I'm never trying to take them away from their husband. I'm trying to get them to hold the standard of being a woman in a way that inspires their man. But it doesn't mean the man gets permission to be a dumbass. Okay. Like there's like I just work with them. If the guys will work with me, I work with them. And the one guy that worked with me, he's doing better than she is. She ran off. Okay, like she's narcissist, she took off. But the one guy that is, he gets better and better and better because now he's starting to live inside the standard of authority and everything else. So when I look at that overall, and there's all these women and everything else, and I'm coming at them aggressively, like it's insane, and they're following. That's a pretty clear indication that when a man leads from God, women follow. It's it's not all of them, right? But several, and most of them, and more all the time, women are coming into this circle, whether it's the membership or some of my high level coaching and training, and they're following at like the higher the level, the more aggressive I am, like way more aggressive. And yet they're following because they hear the truth. And so if I'm looking at that being like, okay, I can train them everything, and as soon as I remove myself from the picture, it's chaos. It just is. There's it in its own right. It's not in a bad, like, not to say they're going to go fall apart or anything, but the stories come in. And so when they're around me, I eliminate the stories because of the authority given from God to me, to women or whatever. Mainly it's God, me, her. Okay, that's the ultimate sequence right there. But there is a form of authority that man was given different than women. And when a man speaks it, it makes a woman feel safe. So and it helps because we're married, so these women don't have to worry about any weird shit. But when a woman can come in and listen to her and listen to me, they feel safe, and then they stay in it. Like they're like, I feel safe here. This makes sense to me. They can think through it. It helps them, align their own thoughts and like different stories and fears or whatever that's going to happen, and they stay there. But if the men aren't stepping up, then it's going to fall apart. That's just the nature of it. So like I'm kind of looking at this more and more every day where I'm like, I really like helping women, but if I really want to help women, I need to go find these fucking weak ass men and show them what's up. Like show them that, hey, you have permission to be a man. You have permission to step the fuck up. She wants you to. She might tell you otherwise, but that's her feelings, not her logic. Right? Like you need to, like you work in logic, she works in feelings. Let her have her feelings, listen to her feelings, love her anyway, but hold the standard of the truth, and she will follow you. You trust in God, not in her. And that's the problem. The world has said this or that. there's just like all this chaos, a lot of single families, no authority. And so these men are more trusting in their wives than they are in God. And that's a failure piece right there. And that's one of the reasons why I say the most important thing to eliminate divorce is God. So, well, it's
Wow.
just there's that. I mean,
No.
obviously there's a lot more to it, but it the reality of it is you just go look at the statistics, right? Like go look at any statistics when it comes to um divorce. You look at the some of the religions that are very family oriented, and the statistics around divorce are massively lower. Whereas you go into the world without God, like no religion, no anything, completely different. And it just that there's a higher authority given that people lean towards to say this is what I have to do, and there's a fear of God, a type of healthy fear of God. And so yeah, then it comes down to communication, knowing the difference. There's a lot of miscommunication, there's a lot of misunderstanding, there's a real failure in men leading their sons, which is why these weak men are coming up. Even like, and I'm speaking about myself a few years ago, right? Like I had fears around things. I wasn't trained on things I didn't know, even though I got trained on a lot of different things. I was really good at holding a masculine frame, which made it really easy to get women and to get sex. Very easy. That was never a problem. But to have a healthy marriage could not, like I was struggling to figure that one out until I got right with God to some degree, and I learned how to expose my bullshit, had the courage to just let it out. Doesn't matter. Nothing can hold me back. It means basically it removed the world's power over me. Fear, shame, and embarrassment no longer has power over me. I mean, yeah, it still can creep in and be like all worried about some shit. But ultimately, it's like, if you don't want to like me, you're not going to like me, because ultimately I report to God. So it ultimately doesn't matter. And also, God can fix any problem I have that fast. So what am I worried about? If God wants me to have the problem, I'm going to have the problem whether I like it or not, because it's going to be his will that gets done, not mine. Secondly, if God doesn't want me to have the problem and I ask him to take care of the problem's done. And when I had a problem with my relationship, I asked him to take care of the problem was done. Within 6 weeks, I met my wife. And then we started dating and figuring it out. So you want to know how fast it can work if you trust God? Really fast and really amazing. Anything else you want to add to that?
I don't know. You also learned how to love me really good.
Hmm.
That was good. That's good. No, that was really great. I just I think we should wrap this up because it was so good. But one more thing I wanted to just note or mention is that when I was dating before I met you, a lot of the guys I was meeting, they were divorced. And I would say majority of them, I asked them why did it end? And I would say majority said because she cheated. And that's why they think it ended. Why do you think that's why they think ended it? Or
Um, well, obviously it was over before that, right? Because women don't cheat typically.
right,
Like not if they're, well, let me put it this way. If a woman is being led inside of God, she's not going to cheat unless she has some really bad childhood trauma that has never been addressed. And that should be discovered in the dating process. So that's one of the reasons why you should date, not jump in relationships, but actually, like when we first met, we would hang out, and then in the beginning, like I might go on a coffee date or a dinner date or somebody with somebody else, but pretty quick, like within a very short period of time, it basically became like I'd start a conversation with another gal, and immediately I would know she doesn't compare to her. So like I'm just going to try and help her, in a positive way, and then they would kind of fizzle out or whatever. So there was never really much that came after that. And then eventually it just got to the point where I'm like, okay, you're just kicking the shit out of all these other women.
Aw.
So like I need to know more at this point because you are hitting a level higher than I've seen. And so now I need to know. And that's when I jumped in. And so that's one of the important things about dating is you get to discover if this person is fronting something or actually showing up in a way. Like, have you seen them under pressure? Have you seen them here? Have you done this? Like, do you know their intentions? Do you know their like their religion, their beliefs, their process, like all these different things? And so that's important there. But these the process that happens, like I mentioned it before, um, a wife starts to complain about something. So the guy's idea is like, okay, well, I'll just do whatever she says. Like, I don't want to do this anymore. Like, it could be, she doesn't want to, um, it could be something as simple as clean the house a certain way or hang out with certain people. She might assume something about your parents and then she doesn't want to be around your parents anymore. Well, they're just always rude to me. I don't want to be around them anymore. And the guy will be like, easier just to not be around him. I just keep my wife happy, right? So right there, you're turning the authority over to her because she probably knows she's full of shit, but now you bought into it too. So now she knows she's got you, right? Whereas if like if Jen were to say that about my parents, like, well, I don't like they did this, I don't like them, whatever, and push away from them. One, I would either know that, and I probably would have already made that move. I would already set the frame on it and said, hey, this is how you need to set your time around them to handle these people because this is who they are. Or if it's not true, I'm going to be like, okay, tell me specifically what happened. And ultimately, I'm going to go to the point of saying, okay, well, if this is true, let's sit down with them and I'm just going to expose everything in one sitting. And she's going to be like, I don't want to do that. I'd be like, well, like they need that. If this is true, they need that. Like they need woke the fuck up. And if they don't like it, then we will remove ourselves from their presence. Like that would be the truth. And and so I'm not giving the authority to her to make the decisions. Like I am going to go figure out what is going on. Or I might just even make a phone call. If she says, well, they said this to me. And then I'm going to say, hey, did you say this to my wife? And if they would say, yeah, we did say that to our wife, like, and if it's out of line, I'm gonna be like, you're fucking out of line. You fucking apologize or fuck off. Like that's how it's gonna go down. Right. Like either you fix your problem or whatever. However, if she's making up a story and then just talking about it because she's emotional in that moment and just needs somebody to listen for a little minute, and then she'll solve the problem and be like, well, it's probably not that big a deal anyway. And that's usually what happens with a lot of things. Well, I really don't like this. I don't know. And an emotional moment could be that time of the month. And it's just like I just listen to the feelings because that's usually how like that's how you stage it. I really feel like, which tells me this is nothing to be logical. This is nothing that I'm gonna think like if I try to fix this problem, I'll be fixing the wrong problem.
And I say that a lot, don't I?
Yeah, you do. And so my job is to listen, to feel, but ultimately not really to listen to fix. Because if I try to fix now, I'm not listening to her, I'm not hearing her or anything else. And so I still have to maintain my authority in it. So I'm not going to buy into what she's saying unless she tries to push something forward. If she tries to push forward how I show up in her feelings, then it's going to be a problem because now she's going to gain the authority. So if it's well, I don't like walking down this side of the street. Be like, I mean, you want to change which side of the street we're on? Like, I mean, maybe I don't care that much, but you don't have a valid reason to like one side or the other. So if I'm going to walk down one side or the other, I'm going to walk down one side or the other. If you're by yourself and you want to walk down one side of the street, be my guest. But I'm not going to give up the authority based on what. Like if it doesn't have legs, I'm not going to hold legs for it. If it does have legs, then I'm going to protect her. Right? Like that there's a big difference in that. And so when guys begin to allow wives to tell stories, then uphold the authority on the story, they have no longer have certainty in the man. And the whole time the man thinks he's just doing the right thing. And it continues and continues. And then pretty soon she starts to take over. She takes over how like how the kids are raised, takes over authority with the kids. Like how many women will get mad at their husband for disciplining their kids?
Mhm.
A vast majority. Most of them because they're young women and have no idea what they're doing. So they think they need to do it this way, but they were not given the authority of discipline. Men were. And so respect your husband's authority over your kids is a big freaking deal. Like stop questioning it, trust God, leave it to him. If he fucks up, God will take care of it, not you. Now, if it's abuse, if it's that other side, yeah, you might have to do like you might have to do it, take it to a different level. But I know some people that are like weaponizing this story because they're like trying to get their way, saying, "Oh, he's being abusive." It's like, no, he's not. He's being a fucking man. Like, stop. Like, there's an authority to it, and if you upheld your job, then he wouldn't be have to be so harsh with the kids to tell them the truth. But you're not doing your job, so stop. Respect him. Let him do his. The more you let him do his, the more the authority of God lays on him, and he will have to show up inside of that. That's why it's so important to have God as the head. Because if he knows he reports to God and the way he handles his kids, that's a you don't want to deal with that consequence, right? So he will show up differently.
Mm.
So you also have to lean on that. And if he's out of line, you might once in a while bypass him to look to God and be like, what do I do? Okay, like occasionally that might happen, but it doesn't mean you control him. Doesn't mean that. Because as soon as you do, it's going to start crumbling. So guys do this. They give it to their wives. They're like, whatever. They quit being the authority. They quit disciplining the kids. Now she's all pissed off because one, you don't help me with the kids. You don't help me with this. I do everything. I clean the house. I do all these things that I never really wanted to do in the first place, but I do it because somebody's got to do them because now I feel important. Now I feel significant. And if I don't have something that feels significant, blah, 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 because like there's all this fear, trauma, other shit that's unaddressed and unpertained to. And then you have another child, is what it feels like as a woman,
Mhm.
because you're doing everything for him and he doesn't do anything, even though he's probably bringing home the check. But because he allows all this other stuff to happen, and then you feel unsafe. And it's not,
He allows it because he thinks that's what you want.
yep, yep. He allows it because he thinks this is the right thing to do.
And in
Because
the moment you do want it.
yeah, in that moment.
Yeah.
But that's the story of the world telling him just give her what she wants. Who wears the pants in the house? Well, she
Happy
does.
wife, happy life.
Yeah, that right. Like crazy shit. Again, going back to God, God said, do the like to the man, this is your job. So when you do your job, then everything works. And then you don't wind up finding out someday that she's banging somebody else because she's not strong enough to just leave the relationship. So she would rather burn it to the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's easier. Or it's easier to turn you into an asshole to run away. You know, and so like my relationship, I gave her permission, right? Like years before, I was in a very dark place, shut down everything else, put myself in a position I shouldn't have been in that led to sex with somebody else. And then I was like, what the fuck? Like I can genuinely say like I'm not sure how I got there, but I knew where I was when I got there, and I went, I'm done. God, it's your turn. Like I'm fucked. Right. And so then I started making changes. And in the end, when I started putting my foot down and she was looking for a way out, she was trying to go to another guy as it was. She asked me, had I ever done anything? And I told her. That's first time I ever told anybody. And I told her what happened and everything and said, this is when everything changed and everything turned around. And from that turning point, all these things happened, but it immediately gave her permission to walk out. So it was like, I mean, otherwise she probably would have led to cheating or something happened or whatever, or even if that wasn't the permission, she was doing a very good job of turning me into an asshole, telling me that I was holding her back, all these weird things. And so it's like, but that's what happens because I was not holding the standard previously, that then when I began to hold the standard, she felt like there was no way for her to, like, that narcissist side was in too much fear. and had to go. And so once it was like, she's going, just let her, like, it is what it is. It hurts, but let it go. So most women will cheat, one, because they've been disconnected for years. They don't feel safe, so they're constantly operating in a state of like just numb,
Mhm.
like spiritually, emotionally numb, and just like getting through life.
Mhm.
They want out, but they don't know how to get out. And then some guy comes along and makes her feel all these feelings she's been looking for. And she'll go along with it. Like, she'll just fall into it, whatever. And she'll justify it and tell stories and everything else until she does. And now there's like, she almost wants to get caught, because if she gets caught, then hopefully it's just over and she can remove this pain from her life.
Mm.
And so, okay. And then it blows up and whatever. And occasionally, sometimes she gets caught and it actually, they find a way to fix the problem. Like, okay, well, there's something happening here, and they dig in and figure it out, and they actually do something different if she's willing. But even if she's willing, the man has to stand up. The man, one, has to take responsibility for what he allowed her to do, right? Because it was his lack of authority with God that led her to that place, because he wasn't leading from the front. He was letting her lead. Granted, this is outside of the stupidity of a man hooking up with a whore, basically, with massive trauma and everything else, and she's probably going to cheat. Like, if you signed up for that, then it's not the same. Just not. Like, some people get in relationships and both of you were cheaters, or one of the people were cheaters, and there's reasons for that. And so if they cheat on you again, like, you signed up for it in a sense. And if you're a woman that did that, like, you need to either leave him or tell him to find God. Like, it's kind of it just is, you signed up for it. If it's a guy, and you married the stripper or the hooker or whatever, and she's cheating on you, yeah, you signed up for it. Like, you bring God in the conversation if you want to go there, okay, and see if you can recover from it. Most likely, if you properly like find a way to truly honor God and find that, then, and start holding that love around her, she will, like, no longer need for anything else. So, just a little different there. We don't deal with people like that much, but I do deal with a lot of trauma, so shit does happen. But yeah, I don't know if that, I mean, I think I've kind of touched a little bit on why that happens, why women leave, why they quit, why they cheat,
Mm-hmm. I think it
different things.
was spot on.
Okay.
Yeah, it was really great. Mm-hmm.
So ultimately, like, this is why, this is probably one of the main things that our coaching has turned into, around helping people align with relationships.
Why do you think that is? Why do we talk about relationships so much? I feel like it's because if you're not happy, like in your intimate relationship, you're not happy.
No.
And so, um, like sometimes, you like a lot of we work on like business goals, health goals, all the things, but like sometimes fixing your relationship will start fixing other things. Like it all kind of goes together, but relationship is just such a big, I mean, everybody wants to
Well, it brings you
be,
joy, right?
yeah,
And
everyone wants to be
there's one other
connected.
thing I wanted to add. One of the reasons, like, one of the things I know that keeps the divorce from happening is kids.
That keeps it from
A
happening.
lot of times, yep. So if you mix all these things, God and kids and family together, the chance of divorce is much lower.
I think it's also two people that choose to be all in.
Yeah, well, obviously. Because sometimes in marriage, you got to be all in, or it's easy to quit.
It's kind of a big deal.
Yeah. Yeah, there's nothing harder than going from, like, being self-contained and self-content and loving yourself, to then bringing someone else in the mix that you can't understand fully, that is fucking up your plans in a way, sometimes, is what it feels like. and like you don't know where they're emotionally at all the time, and you just have to trust God. And if you don't have God, then it's like you're like confused and it's crazy, and to be all in is like, well, I don't know what to do. And so yeah, but you have to be, you like, to me, you got to have God and you got to be all in. Otherwise, you're not married. This is what it is. So this is why we wind up helping a lot of people. I think one of the reasons is, one, we have a lot of the results people want, and two, we see where people, like, they might desire money, or they might desire a body, or they might desire this, but the most joy comes from being with someone, right?
And in a happy, thriving relationship
Yeah,
that feels
yeah.
alive.
And so there's always a big goal around marriage, relationships, or connection, or communication, or whatever, because there's just so much joy in it. You can make all the money you want. If you don't have people to share it with, it doesn't matter. You can have a perfect body, and if you don't got a wife to share it with, who cares? I'm just saying.
Mhm.
It's kind of sarcastic, but
It was really like sad thing I read today, and it's right here at the top. Um, it said, well, I'm in a group for people who are married to alcoholics. We don't drink.
yeah,
But this girl said, and I think when you're an alcoholic, you are very disconnected
yeah,
during that. Um, I was disconnected when I was drinking all the time, but this lady said, "Why did I think taking a vacation with an alcoholic would be relaxing? Being a single mom while married is a different kind of lonely." That's really sad, isn't it?
yep,
I feel so sad for her, but like I get it. Just that last line, being a single mom while married is a different kind of lonely. She's married to a man that needs to step up. He needs to
yeah.
hire you.
Yeah, he needs kicked in the fucking nuts. So that's what I do. Like, you hire me, I'll kick you in the nuts and get like,
Just a kick in the nuts, that's it.
yeah. I mean, ultimately, it's it feels a lot better when, when you have amazing sex, when you have joy, when you have love, when she's fulfilled. I mean, part of the providing and protecting part, when you're a man and it doesn't feel good being around your wife, like if she's fighting with you or anything else, you don't feel like you're providing. So then you're just checking the boxes,
And
going through the
if
paces.
you're not happy, he's not happy. And if you're not happy, she's not happy.
Guaranteed.
And so, if you're not happy but you think he is, like, something needs to change. If you're not happy, nobody's happy.
Yeah.
And so we need to get it.
Yeah, and this can start on either side. Even though I say I coach a lot of women, where I'm like seeing that, like, hey, if the guys don't step up, this isn't gonna work out well. Even though that's the case, we're still teaching the women how to show up more feminine, which is activating the man inside of him, right? So as a woman, when you show up a certain way, you can actually trigger things that gets him inspired to be more of a man. And so if you're the one initiating and starting it, probably because you created the situation also, then you got to be patient to get there, and you'll watch him start showing up. And ultimately, if this person isn't supposed to be with you, you doing the right thing, they will walk away from you. You don't have to leave them. But usually when one person starts and they're willing to hold firm to it, then the other person comes around. You just have to be a little bit patient. But it's a lot easier, in my opinion, from the guy's side, to start holding this space and love for your wives. And then all of a sudden you start getting everything from them. And it's like, holy shit, what the fuck happened here? And it's like, why didn't anybody teach me this? Well, because there's too many weak men, because people listen to the world and the media for too long instead of the word. And it's just, I mean, that's nature. We get righteous, we get wicked. It's like, it's just how it is. So it's not a big deal. But if you find yourself listening to this being like, oh man, I don't like what he's saying, I really don't like this, but I hear what he's saying, and like, maybe I should do something different. Yeah, jump in, come find us. Like, it's no judgment. As I told you, um, I was that guy. I'm not judging. I'm just saying, I I managed to find a way. And now my desire is to help more people be there with me inside of the conversation of God.
Like we did it wrong, so we could now get it right.
Yeah. 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 Use me for example. Don't be me. Let
Mm-hmm.
me help you not be me.
Yeah. All right. Do you want to say goodbye?
Bye.
All right. We'll see you
All
next
right.
time.
See you
Thank
guys.
you. Bye.